It's another one of the 365 days, that is. This is Eagles 365 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. And you got the Mac guys here to talk Birds football for the next couple hours. That would be my partner, John McMullen, along with me, Jody McDonald. How are you this morning, J-Mac?
Doing well, Jody. Excited. Got a little practice to go to. Well, something like practice, whatever they're doing down there.
Yeah. How would you describe it? It's kind of a football gathering. It's a couple drills, a lot of stretching, calisthenics.
I like that word. It's a football gathering. We're going to get together and be on the same field together. So it's a gathering.
That's a good thing that you're gathering with the Birds this morning. And it'll be a gathering that will include Ryan Kerrigan, who had his first media availability yesterday. And he talked about how he became a Philadelphia Eagle, that they really recruited him. They went after him. The guys on the team reached out, told him this is a good place to be. We're going to be a better team. Don't worry about the fact that it used to be a rival. They'll love you here in Philadelphia. The coaching staff sold him on their philosophy and the way they see him fitting in for them going forward. Good for the Eagles. You know that I talked Ryan Kerrigan up for a month and a half prior to his actually putting his name on a piece of paper for the Eagles. I got him for a reasonable price, and I think this guy has checked all the right boxes since he's become a Bird.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody had any question about that. Anybody who's ever met Ryan Kerrigan knows he's going to be a culture fit, so to speak, knows he's going to be a good teammate, knows he's going to be a mentor. So all of that is good. By the way, I think he could still play. I think all of that is good. The other stuff, that's kind of like football speak at this time of year. Not to say the Eagles didn't want him. They wanted him. I mean, it's a good player, but if you would have told me when we were talking about it before, well, they're going to get him for a $1.36 million cap number, I would have said two things. I would have said, you're nuts, number one. And number two, why would Ryan Kerrigan take that? The answer to number two is he had to take it. I mean, unfortunately, that's where we are in the environment, COVID partially, the fact that 30 is a dirty word in this league often, and he's going to be 33 by the time September rolls around. So the Eagles were able to get a bargain. Why not take it, man? This one fell in their lap, Jody. So more of a recruitment. And when it got down to the nitty-gritty, guys are calling them saying, come up, sign with us, sign the prove-it deal here. Yeah, all of that is true, but if somebody came in with a $7 million check, that recruitment wouldn't have meant a hill of beans, is what I'm trying to say.
We certainly understand that and agree with you. None of us really know exactly how his negotiations went with all the teams across the National Football League. And I think it's fair to guesstimate that if someone had put a 2-year number with double what the Eagles guaranteed on the table, he probably would have taken it. But you never know. And maybe there was an offer that was actually more than the Eagle offer. Maybe recruitment played into it. Maybe location played into it. We're only hop, skipping a jump out of the Beltway up here, and he may have wanted to stay with an East Coast team on the East Coast of the country. You don't know. But they did get the job done for the deal that they got the job done, the numbers, and I think that's a really nice addition. We're still waiting for the Eagles to get that quote-unquote other cornerback who probably can step right into a starting spot in the lineup, but that hasn't happened yet. So if you can't get what you want, probably a corner over a pass rusher, if you're putting him in order of priority, well, then you get what you need. And the Eagles needed a better
Stones reference. I like it.
When I can, I work the Stones in, or Eddie. All-time great rock and roll group, if I can. But I think it's a fitting use of the phrase here, because the Eagles needed a pass rushing upgrade, in my estimation. This team is not that great at that. And when hearing from Jonathan Gannon last week, he told us they will build their defense to fit the talent that they have. Well, if that's your mindset, that's great. I think it's the way teams should be built. But you like to have options. You like to be able to throw different things at the other opposition. And if you got a guy who can come off the edge and cause a little havoc in the background, it's only going to make your job easier.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. On the field, I don't think, I think your need conversation is all sort of dependent on you're grading it on a scale, so to speak. They had far greater needs than an edge rusher, but this is what fell into their lap. And by the way, you're right. Last year, you got to talk about Will Parks. Will Parks got offered more money by Detroit and Minnesota, and he decided to sign in Philadelphia for a number of reasons. One, he's from Philadelphia. He wanted to be here. It obviously didn't work out. So it does happen. But you're talking about, 1.5 versus 2, something like that. Maybe somebody will. So, Cincinnati might have offered Ryan Kerrigan a little bit more money. But again, if you're up in the 7-8 million range, no, he's going to go play for the Bengals. You got to be honest about that. But I far bigger need to me remains cornerback. I think John, I wrote about that on Philly Voice Jody yesterday. I think Jonathan Gannon's the only one who says, "Oh, I'm fine with it." He's not fine with it. We all know he's not fine with it. But you gotta play the hand that you're dealt, so to speak. And right now, he's got Avonte Maddox and Zach McPherson and Mike Jaquette and a cast of thousands, and he's got to roll with them until Howie Roseman gets him something else. Ultimately, I think he's going to get him something else sometime post June 1st. Might be closer to training camp, might be in August. But they're going to get another cornerback. I just can't tell you who that is.
I'm sure Jonathan Gannon would have said, "Oh, I'm fine with our defensive line and our edge pressure up until they signed Ryan Kerrigan." Well, when he signed Ryan Kerrigan, guess what? It just got better and it got easier, your job for the upcoming season. So you'll always take upgrades coming from outside at any time, specifically at this time during this season. They got it on the pass rush end. Will they get it on the cover end? It's a story that we'll continue to keep an eye on for you here in Birds 365. Intriguing that you mentioned the name Will Parks, because I was going to ask you a question today, so I'll do so right now here early in the show. After watching the Eagles, I'll use the word disastrous, 4-11-1 season last year, a lot of things went wrong, and we've been bringing it down here since we started Birds 365. The Birds have been doing it since last, October, when things started to go in the wrong direction for them. And watching the Eagles week in and week out, you try and get a grasp on what's going wrong, what their needs are, what they need to improve, what's going to change in the future going on when you have a season go by the board like last one did. And there's a guy on the Birds who I could never get a grasp on. I had my opinions on every player at every single position. And one guy who every time after watching an Eagle game, I said to myself, well, did he do his job? Did he not do his job? I don't remember him standing out as a guy who was helping the Eagles lose on an all too often basis. But I don't remember him being a guy making outstanding plays. That, that kept them in the game, or that helped them win the game, the few that they had. And he played a bunch for the Eagles last year, and he was unremarkable, both good and bad. And that's not really good. If you say that, it means probably more bad than good. But I want to get your take on him. Marcus Epps was a guy who did fill in, mostly because of Will Parks and his injury issues and the like. He was supposed to be a backup and a depth guy for the Eagles last year, but because of issues and injuries and the like, he actually played a whole lot of snaps for them. And at the end of the game, you think back, you look at who did what, and you check the stats and the like. He got his fair share of tackles, not an outrageous number. Safety position is a position where you can get tackles. Didn't come up with any major picks or great pass defenses that I remembered off the top of my head. Wow, he really shut down that drive with that play. I came away at the end of the year not knowing whether I thought Marcus Epps was a good contributor, a key contributor, a non-contributor for the Eagles. He's still very much in their safety mix. What was your 2020 impression of Marcus Epps?
Yeah, I think you described it pretty well. He's kind of just a guy. Look, he's very instinctive. The reason they brought him in, I think he was a 6th-round pick. So understand he was a late-round pick, and obviously the Eagles under Jim Schwartz played a lot of single high safety, and that's what he is good at. Very instinctive player, very good in coverage. Not the best athlete in the world, but the old high football IQ, I would say, is the best to describe Marcus Epps. And as you get him closer to the line of scrimmage, it's probably more of a liability. If he's got to use his athleticism, probably more of a liability. So he's more of a coverage guy. And I think in a lot of ways, he's a better fit for this coaching staff, which projects to play a lot of cover 2, cover 3. And that makes sense because who drafted him? Mike Zimmer in Minnesota. They drafted him to play sort of the position out there, which would have been Anthony Harris, who was also here because of his relationship with Jonathan Gannon in prior history. So, look, this team, and it's evident by the fact that they hired John Gannon, has a lot of respect for the way Mike Zimmer plays defensive football. They should. He's one of the best defensive coordinators in this league. You and I have talked about him as a head coach. He's got some deficiencies there. I think he's a little bit better than you think he is, but nonetheless, they have a lot of respect for him defensive side of the football, and they should. That's why they bring in a guy like Marcus Epps. He does certain things well. But if you're looking at him to be a full-time starting safety, I think you're going to have some issues. They brought him in to be a backup to Rodney McLeod, who was the single high safety. I think he's fine in that position. I think he's solid depth. I think you saw that. If he's forced into action, he can play pretty well. But the more he plays, the more he's going to get exposed.
You mentioned Rodney McLeod, who is, when he's healthy, one of the Eagle best tacklers in the secondary, in the back 7, I would say. As a matter of fact, injuries will cloud when his season is going to kick in for the Birds this year. Will Epps be purely a backup guy and a depth guy, or will he be forced to start for as long as necessary before McLeod is ready to go this upcoming year?
Well, they brought in Anthony Harris, so you think there's a little redundancy there. I think they're going to want Anthony Harris to play in that single high position, as I mentioned, when they're in that kind of look. When you're cover 2, I can see Anthony Harris playing opposite Marcus Epps and even cover 3 type situation. I do believe the Eagles would like to see what Kayvon Wallace has. And he was a rookie last year, rookie 4th-round pick. He's more of a natural box safety, Jody. So that to me fits a little bit better. If you think about how Minnesota played, it was Harris and Harrison Smith. Harrison Smith, though, is an all-pro level player, so that's one of the best safeties in football. But you need that type of safety. He was the guy who moved all around. He was the guy that played up in the box, could play cover, could do anything. I think it's unfair to say Kayvon Wallace could do that, but you want those sort of traits, and I think he's more of that type of player. But yeah, we've talked about the 3 safety looks. We've talked about, Jacoby Stevens, who they list as a linebacker, but is really going to be a hybrid. He's that type of player too. So they're obviously looking for that more of a box look. I don't think Marcus Epps can give them that consistent.
And again, that's the conclusion I draw. You would know better than me because you get insights from the coaches and what they're looking for. That's where you scare me with your stance on Greg, on Mr. Walker.
Wow.
On the outside.
By the way, it's not only me. We're going to have Jimmy Kempski. I encourage you to ask Jimmy as well.
Fair. I will do just that. I'm a fan. But you guys get on the record, off the record quotes from coaches where they can tell you, we would hope to be able to get better out of that position. And then you see if that's the case. If the Eagles are going to do that with a guy like Marcus Epps, it is going to be Wallace who's going to do so. From the time that they drafted him, everyone said, well, he's probably going to be a project coming into the NFL because didn't know if any team would be able to use him in the same way as college team used him. So he's going to have to learn. He's going to have to pick up to the speed of the National Football League, but he is so athletic that when he gets his bearings in the league, he's going to be a very good player, a playmaker type. I bought all of that, and it was not a first-round pick, so you can take your time and say, yes, we're going to develop him over time. We're not going to throw him into the deep end of the pool and expect production from day one. He shows up in camp. When does the earning start? Is it year 2, or is year 2, like year 1, still a fit/learning process? If you tell me year 3, I'm going to scream out loud because he wasn't a 7th-round draft pick. They did reach for him at one point fairly early in the draft. Is this the year that the expectations get raised with Wallace? And did the expectations change because it's a new coaching staff? The Eagles staff who drafted him were here last year, used him as much as they thought they could or should. Well, this is a whole new coaching staff that wasn't involved in the selection of the player. How does that fit in the way they look at Kayvon Wallace this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a clean slate for everybody with the coaching staff, and that could be good and that could be bad. In other words, they don't have any skin in the game when it comes to a mid-round pick like Kayvon Wallace. I mean, if they don't like him as a player, they could move on from him. That's how it could go in a negative fashion. If they like him as a player, I can tell you most coaching staffs I've always talked to expect the most improvement from year 1 to year 2, which is a big, black mark against a player like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, for instance. And it's common sense, Jody. If you think about coming into a new work environment for the first time, there's nerves. Not only that, you have all the other stuff. You have to find a place to live. You're moving, in a lot of cases, to a different part of the country for the first time as a very young player. There's a lot of unevenness with rookies in this league before you even get to the football part of it. Then you got to learn the football part of it. So everybody expects that big jump in year 2 when you have that comfort factor. And when you don't get it, and worst case, when there's an actual decline, it's a pretty good indication it's probably not going to work out. Mm-hmm. So I would say this is a big year, big training camp, big gathering today for Kayvon Wallace. Everything's big. He's got to prove a lot of things this year.
We certainly agree on that. And here's the one thing that comes into play, and we have discussed this before when the Eagles made the decision to move away from Doug Pederson, start a new coaching staff with Nick Sirianni et al. You're right. This coaching staff isn't married to the players that were selected prior to their getting here. But the general manager is.
Yeah,
he's what Howie Roseman picks. So if the coaching,
and he's got some power too, Jody. He's got some power,
and I think he's kind of flexed it this offseason. You are dead on point with that one. I'm guessing the coaching staff is saying, not sure what Kayvon can do. He's not quite living up to the fitting that we want. Howie Roseman says, excuse me, can you guys work with him a little bit more and try and get a little bit more? We hired you to be able to make a football player out of Kayvon Wallace. Yeah, I don't think they'll be discarding.
And by the way, Jody, they have a need at that position. So I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying he's in trouble. I'm just saying everybody's got a clean slate. Everybody with a new coaching staff. Well, you're right. New coaching staff and new general manager, it's even worse. You got the same general manager. He does have skin in the game.
And we'll see how that skin covers this year for the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, clean slate for our next guest. Always, whenever he joins us, because we love talking to him. Coming up next here on Birds 365, it's Jimmy Kempski from PhillyVoice.com. Stay with the Mac and Mac guys.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
7 on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 98, is a proud sponsor of The Labor Show with J. Doc and Krause every Saturday night from 6 till 8 p.m. IBEW Local 98's highly trained and superbly skilled electricians are the best in the business, setting the highest safety standards in the electrical industry. So when you're planning your next industrial, commercial, or residential project, choose an IBEW Local 98 union contractor. Learn more at ibew98.org.
The future waits for no one, so we refuse to wait for it. We're not just pilots and engineers. We are pioneers. Today, battles are waged in nanoseconds, and planes are piloted from the other side of the world. We turn night into day and fly missions in space. The future's not coming. It's already here. This is the future. Join us and be the future.
The savoring taste of a good bag of beef jerky is so enjoyable at any time of the day, as long as you can find it. Here's what we suggest. Pure Bull Beef Jerky is our answer, and soon it will be yours. Locally produced in the Philadelphia region, this high-quality, healthy protein snack is easy to secure. Go to steersnacks.com, and you'll see hot garlic, tropical heat, Pure Bull dry rub, and our favorite, Huck and Fod. What's that? Huck and Fod. Go now to steersnacks.com.
Welcome to the Wildwoods, the perfect place where you can safely do everything or nothing at all. Catch a wave, take a nap, go for a drive, grab a bite. It's your vacation, and we're doing everything we can to make it a safe one. The Wildwoods. Your vacation, your way.
Mag guys here on Birds 365. John McMullen, Jody McDonald, giving you Eagles insight for the next hour and change before John McMullen goes down to the Eagle gathering. He likes my terminology there. We'll see if Jimmy Kempski does too. Little practice time, and then media availability. So we'll get even more Birds info out there for you today. We're getting info and opinion coming your way. We know McMullen's got a following of his own. They call it the McMullen Mafia. Well, us South Jersey guys stick together as well. Joining me next is part of the Marlton Mafia. My hometown, his former hometown. Jimmy Kempski of PhillyVoice.com hops on board with us. How are you, JK?
Current hometown, too.
Currently
in Marlton, yes.
Why did I think you ski-daddled a couple towns over? My bad.
I did ski-daddle, and then 20 years later, I came back. So here I am.
To your roots. So we're going to get into your roots with the Philadelphia Eagles. McMullen told me I basically have to go here first. Are the Eagles coaching staff telling you the same thing they're telling him, that they need to improve in the slot position this year, that Greg Ward, while a nice player, isn't quite good enough, and they think they can be better there?
Yeah, I mean, you look at his yards per catch average since he's been with the Eagles here. I think it's under 8. It's definitely under 10. Like he's totally non-threatening in terms of like a down the field receiver, and then also in terms of getting yards after the catch. So yeah, I think that's a low bar in terms of being able to upgrade that position. I'm actually a little bit surprised that they did. Well, I guess maybe not totally surprised after taking a player like Devontae Smith in the first round. I thought that this draft in particular was just loaded with slot receiver talent, and they had 10 picks heading into that draft. So I was mildly surprised that they didn't, take a slot receiver later in the draft. But yeah, I mean, for sure, they can do better at that spot. And there are some options that the Eagles have, and some of these younger players, like they could go with maybe a bigger slot in Travis Fulgham. They could go with maybe one of these speed guys. I don't think Hightower is a good fit for the slot, but maybe like a Quez Watkins could slot in there and maybe be more of a playmaking threat than a guy like Greg Ward. But I'm on the same page with John in that they can certainly do better there.
Yeah, I don't know, Jimmy. Jody thinks I'm lying to him. For some
I'm not
reason.
lying. I just think you're both wrong. I
Okay.
think
well,
Greg Ward
well,
is
we
having
could
a
be.
bust-out
could be.
year, and that, yes, I will put it on the quarterback and the system last year as to why his average yards per catch was under 8.
Well, I would
7.9.
argue that Jimmy and I aren't wrong. Now, this is mainly the old coaching staff, so maybe they're wrong, but we're just telling you what the Eagles want to get better at that position. I think that's a fair.
And
Doesn't
I
mean
think
they can.
I think they can with a guy named Greg Ward. I think he can be better for them this year at that position and put up better numbers, which included leading the team in touchdown receptions last year, in case we're just checking all the stats that Greg Ward did or didn't put up last year.
But this is a team that hasn't had a 600-yard receiver in 2 years. I mean, they got to get better. Is that fair to say? Jimmy's doing his series about depth on this team. Would you say this is a deep team at the wide receiver position?
Oh God, no. I mean, they barely even have starters, really. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone is a projection. Every single one of these players, even Devontae Smith, like, I think he's going to be really good in the league, but he's a rookie. He's a projection. Jalen Reagor hasn't proven anything yet. He's your number 2 receiver right now. And then there's the debate over who's going to be this. I will say this for Greg Ward. At least he caught the football, which is more than you can say for other receivers in the past few years. But yeah, I think depth at that wide receiver position. I mean, first of all, they don't, again, just the starters alone are question marks. And then you get past those guys and it gets even dicier.
Yeah, maybe I'm an old school guy that I look at what guys have actually accomplished. And Greg Ward has accomplished something as compared to other guys in the wide receiver room right now, which lends me to a question about a guy who did accomplish something last year, as short-lived as it was, and that was Travis Fulgham. For about a 4 or 5 week period, he was easily the best Eagles wide receiver, and he was almost the norm of good starting wide receivers in the National Football League, which Eagles haven't had many of those runs. And then toward the end of the year, he kind of disappeared. Again, do we blame Travis Fulgham? Do we blame Doug Pederson in the offensive play calling? Do we put it on the quarterbacks? Because that would include both Carson Wentz and the current quarterback, Jalen Hurts. Where did Fulgham come from? And then where did he go to, Jimmy Kempski?
Yeah, I mean, the first part of that question, I mean, he was a late addition to training camp, and I thought he actually played pretty well during the backstretch of training camp. Let's go. This guy's going to stick at least on the practice squad. And then he did. They called him up, and yeah, I mean, he had that 5-game stretch that you're talking about, where I believe he led the NFL in receiving during that specific 5-game stretch, and then he kind of disappeared. And I don't know if what happened on his part. My understanding is like he wasn't a great practice player. That sort of trickled out a little bit, but I think even more so, there was the asinine decision to reinsert Alshon Jeffrey back into the lineup when Fulgham was a young player. Their season was already not going well. Get the young player as many snaps as he can get. Who cares if Alshon Jeffrey's back? Don't put him. Don't take away snaps from Travis Fulgham to get Alshon Jeffrey back in the lineup. So I think that affected or sort of stalled Travis Fulgham's progress during the 2020 season.
Yeah, it's difficult for coaches. I think, Jimmy, you realize that they tend to default to veteran guys that they're comfortable with, and they do at least understand how to line up correctly, where to be, practice in the right way. And that might have been one of Doug's faults, to be honest. I think that's fair to say. But the wide receiver position as a whole, you talk the little access we've had to Nick Sirianni. He talks about, I think you hear this all the time. Everybody's going to play everywhere. X, Z, slot, flex. And hey, Devontae Smith might be able to do that. But the unintended consequence to that is, well, we'll use Jody's guy, Greg Ward. You want Greg Ward playing outside the numbers?
Right.
Is that even possible to have guys move around like that, or is that just coach speak in May?
It probably varies from player to player, of course. Like, I think Devontae Smith can play in the slot. He can play the Z position. X is to be determined. Reagor can certainly play the Z. It'll be interesting to see if they give him opportunities in the slot. I think Fulgham showed in that, that small stretch. He played all over the formation. He played in the slot. He played on the outside. But yeah, there are certain guys that are, slot guys only and outside guys only, or they're better suited to one position or another. Like we saw Nelson Aguilar struggle on the outside here, and then when they moved him into the slot, he was outstanding. So yeah, I mean, it's nice to say that, and it's nice to hope that your receivers can play every position at the wide receiver spot, but that's not always the reality. You have to have, certain player. You have to have, really talented players who are able to do that. And they don't have that right now, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see if they have a couple guys who step up to become that, but they've got to certainly prove it on the field. All right, speaking of depth in positions, and that's what Jimmy's last article on Philly Boys was about, and catching the football, the tight end position.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Zach Ertz still here. I know we're a week before June 1st, and then there's a really good chance for that to change itself. But as of this moment, Zach Ertz is still here, so I don't even know whether to count him as part of the tight end mix for the Birds. Let's assume for today's conversation he's not. The Eagles have near enough as far as getting through an entire season at tight end in your book, Jimmy K?
Well, first, to start with the Zach Ertz discussion, I would rank it like this. 1, he gets traded for some minimal compensation, like 6th, 7th round or the equivalent. 2, they release him outright. 3, they get decent compensation. We'll call that like a 4th round pick or higher. And then 4, finally, that they just keep him. I think that's the least likely scenario. So you're right. Like, they don't have much in the way of depth there. Certainly Dallas Goedert is, when he's healthy and when he's on the field, he's a complete tight end. He can catch the football. He can run after the catch. He can block. He can pass protect. He's everything anyway, but he hasn't really broken out yet. So while I think he's kind of safely in like the top 10 tight ends in the NFL, I think we're kind of expecting more out of him. But then beyond him, they don't have anything. Like, it's just a lot of guys that are either fringe roster guys or sort of lottery ticket guys like Hakeem Butler or like a Tyree Jackson who they're converting from quarterback. So they don't really have much there at all. Richard Rodgers is still out there. I would imagine at some point they might bring him back or a similar type of veteran. But yeah, it's a very not very deep position. And we've gotten sort of accustomed to the Eagles having those 2 tight ends in Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. And as of right now, they don't really have that.
Well, Jimmy, speaking of you did the defense today. You did the offense, I think, yesterday.
Yeah.
Your depth pieces on phillyboys.com. Did you come down on the line of the lines, the offensive line, defensive line? That's where this team has some depth. Is that fair to say?
Oh, for sure. So I would say that at the skill positions, they're not deep. Like a quarterback, running back, they're reasonably deep. But quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, not deep. Linebacker, cornerback, safety, scary, not deep. But offensive line, defensive line, I think they're in good shape. Obviously, the signing of Ryan Kerrigan gives them a foursome rotation of Graham, Kerrigan, Sweat, Barnett. And then at the defensive tackle position, normally they dumped a lot of money into, their talent there with Malik Jackson and Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox. And they're still paying Cox and Hargrave a lot. But now they hadn't drafted actually a defensive tackle during since Howie Roseman's second stint as the general manager. They've only drafted 1 prior to the season. That was Elijah Qualls, 6th round, 2017. Mm-hmm. They take 2 in this draft, and Milton Williams in the 3rd round, Marlon Tuipulotu in the 6th round. So they'll be relying on those guys to play immediately. Like, if you look at their history of rookie defensive tackles playing early, they've had some undrafted guys that got playing time as rookies. So those 2 guys are going to play right away. And then on the offensive line, I think they're really deep. There's a lot of ifs with that offensive line, particularly with the starters. Is Lane Johnson's ankle going to hold up this season? Is Brandon Brooks going to be able to recover from his second Achilles tear the way he did on the first one? Jason Kelsey's getting up there in age. Is he going to maintain his level of play? Isaac Seumalo, sort of under the radar, has been, he's been banged up here and there along the line. Jordan Mailata had, 2 seasons end because of back injury. So we got to see if we can hold up. We got to see who's going to win that competition, first of all, too, between him and Andre Dillard. So, there are a lot of ifs. And then even on the backup front, like you got Landon Dickerson, of course, who has 4 major injuries throughout his college career. He's now coming in and potentially playing a reasonably important role as that first guy off the bench and there are questions whether Holden will be ready for the start of the season. But it's a good offense. It's a really good starting offensive line. Like there aren't many teams that the Eagles would trade places with along their offensive line, and then they have depth in guys like Dickerson and whoever doesn't win the left tackle starting job, and Jack Driscoll, and we saw a little bit from Nate Herbig last year. So they do have some guys that can kind of fill in and a good starting rotation. So yeah, I'd say the lines, which is where you want to be deep, more so than the other spots, they're in good shape there, but everywhere else, not so much.
Let me ask you to go a little further on it. Two guys that you just mentioned toward the end there, both who got a chance to step in last year because of the injuries on the Eagles offensive line. Everybody's hoping Lane Johnson, healthy, stays on the field, plays to a Pro Bowl level. Yes. Brandon Brooks stays healthy, stays on the field, plays to a Pro Bowl level. Yes. Well, neither one of those things happened last year.
Right.
If that happens again this year, Driscoll and Herbig were two guys who I was actually pretty pleased with and surprised that they were able to play to the level that they did. They didn't make you forget Lane Johnson or Brandon Brooks, but they did their job, and they were competent for guys with as little inexperience as they had in the league. Which one is further along? Which one is more likely to step in and kick his game up even or another notch this year if that's necessary?
So I think Herbig's ceiling is probably a little bit more limited than a guy like Driscoll. He just doesn't possess the same kind of like athleticism that Jack Driscoll does. So I think he just kind of is what he is. But last year he filled in at, multiple spots along the line, left guard, right guard. So he has that, left-right versatility, which is nice. Some guys can't do that. He could. Jack Driscoll, I thought like you said, I thought he filled in reasonably well for Lane Johnson, especially for a rookie. He had some injury problems too. Like he came out of a bunch of games like mid-game. So I think that's a concern for him going forward, but he wasn't very, I actually took a deeper look at his season specifically earlier this year, and not impressive in the run game. He's not going to blow guys off the line of scrimmage, but in pass protection, which is what you're going to prioritize at that spot anyway, I thought he did a very good job as a rookie, going to get up against some premium pass rushing talent too. So I would say that from a long-term perspective, I think that Jack Driscoll is the more appealing player than Herbig, but both guys for the 2021 season specifically, I think they're both, they both proved a little bit last year that they can fill in and be quality depth should one of those guys go down.
Speaking of pass protection, Jimmy, I want to talk to you about left tackle.
Yep.
And do you get the same kind of blowback that I get when I say Andre Dillard might win this job? Don't give up on Andre Dillard. I think people forget, if you rewind to 2019, there were some serious issues at left tackle, especially with the bull rush, Everson Griffin, Robert Quinn, but he was getting better. Where it really fell apart is moving over to right tackle. And I think the team was upset that he didn't fight through that. But nonetheless, he was starting to improve at left tackle. He's a natural left tackle. He's a great natural pass protector. But man, I get killed when I say anything badly about Jordan Mailata, who I love.
Yeah.
But technique-wise, there's still a lot of issues there.
Yeah, Mailata, I looked at all the Eagles, I looked at all the Eagles sacks during the 2020 season and determined that Mailata gave up more sacks than anyone on the team. I think it was 8 or 9 that he gave up on the season. So, yeah, I mean, he's not a star player by any stretch, but I think he showed some promise last year. And obviously with his size and his athleticism, I think that's what has people excited. As you mentioned with Dillard, even before he moved out to right tackle, like the week, you and I were in the locker room, of course, that week leading up to the game where he was going to start at right tackle, he seemed to think like it wasn't going to go well. So it was already sort of a preconceived notion in his mind that he was not going to play well against the Seahawks that day. And they just basically bulldozed them for the entirety of the first half. They got him out of there. And I think it was Matt Pryor that they even put in. And like you're getting benched for Matt Pryor at right tackle, no less. That's not good. So he had a few bad games, as you mentioned, early in that year at left tackle, particularly against the Vikings, when he faced, the basically two different kinds of skill sets in Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin. Had another bad game against, I believe it was the Cowboys. Not Alden Smith, the guy that
Robert Quinn.
Robert Quinn ate him up a little bit. And then he was better against, I believe it was the Bills and the Bears. He still gave up sacks in each of those games, but those games didn't get out of control from the Eagles' perspective. Like the Eagles fell behind early in those Cowboys and Vikings games. So, opposing pass rushers just kind of like pinning their ears back and coming at him. So that was a bad situation for him to be in. They won each of the Bears and Bills games, so it wasn't like they were playing from behind, and they were able to protect him a little bit better in that game. But I did not feel great at all about his rookie season. His athleticism is really appealing, and that's why they took him, obviously, where they did. That's why they traded up for him. He's got great feet. He's got, he's got everything you want from an athletic standpoint. It's just, can he, as you mentioned, can he anchor against bull rushes? And where's his mentality? Like, is he going to be able to make it in this city, or is he better off playing in a market that's not so, kind of in your face is the kind way I'll put it. So, yeah, I mean, that'll be obviously Mailata versus Dillard is going to be the premier, obvious best training camp battle that we watch this offseason.
One last offensive line question for me, Jimmy. And it's a hypothetical question, and it may never come to fruition, but I love hypothetical questions. Let's say both Mailata and Dillard have questions in camp that Ryan Kerrigan is making both look bad from time to time.
Probably going to happen.
Which he will do.
Right.
Yes.
And first game of the preseason, both of them have some issues with whoever is playing across the field from them. What's the over-under date on the whispers of the return of future Hall of Famer, left tackle of the Philadelphia Eagles, with a very good, tight relationship with the owner, Jason Peters, one more time?
Yeah, I mean, this time last year, I thought it was probable that they were going to bring him back just as sort of like insurance for Andre Dillard. And then when Brandon Brooks went down, they signed him to be the right guard. We all know the story. Anyway, I think it's very unlikely that they'll bring him back this year, but I wouldn't put it at 0% because I just never trust that they can give up on players that they're familiar with, because they, on the quote unquote, no new ideas, idea that they keep bringing back these guys with which they know, whatever. But yeah, you're absolutely right that during training camp, there's going to be moments where, Mailata and Dillard are getting smoked by guys like, Brandon Graham and Ryan Kerrigan. So there's going to be
Osman.
Joe Osman owns Jordan Mailata in training camp. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be some iffy moments for sure. It'll be, I mean, that battle is going to be really interesting to watch. Like, personally, I think Mailata is like, even though we mentioned that, he gave up more sacks than anyone on the team last year, I think he's actually the better football player right now than Dillard, and maybe even has sort of a higher ceiling because of his size and his athleticism, whereas Dillard kind of only has the athleticism. But I guess the one thing that Dillard has going for him is that he's a first-round pick, and Howie Roseman is not going to want to see him fail horribly on this team. So I think he's going to sort of have that, Howie bump. And as we learned during Nick Sirianni's initial press conference, he does not have control over the 53-man roster.
No.
May not even have control over the 46-man roster on game day.
No.
So, I mean, it's not going to be really his decision as much as it's going to be Howie's on who makes the team and possibly even who starts.
By the way, Jimmy, I don't think he knows right now still if he has control.
Yeah, right. He didn't know during his press conference whether he was going to set the roster on game day.
Which is a pretty good indication he doesn't. He's not going to have that
power. It's almost like, I forgot to ask about that during my interview.
But I do. By the way, you bring up a good point. I don't think as many people have talked about that. Jordan is 6'8", 350, and he's got back problems.
Yes.
I mean, that concerns me a little bit. So you got to throw that into the mix as well. But I do want to shift to the defensive side. You talked a little bit about the defensive line, but that back seven, man.
Oof.
I mean, what do you do? At linebacker, I say throw Davion Taylor the deep end of the pool. At least he's athletic. See if he can play. You agree with that?
Yeah, I've been meaning to take a look at his season last year. He didn't play a lot of snaps, obviously. I know that there's one game where he played a decent number of snaps, and my understanding is that it went pretty badly.
Yeah.
Sean Bradley's another guy that you could maybe throw in that mix where he actually played Sean Bradley played more than Davion Taylor did in the regular defense anyway. So yeah, I mean those guys and Jacoby Stevens, those three guys drafted, the last 2 years, they're all lottery tickets to me. And you don't want your 3rd round pick linebacker to be, to be classified as that, but that's sort of what he is right now. He's a lottery ticket. Like, he's not a guy that you can really count on to be a starter now or anytime soon. And maybe he makes a big leap and he was a really interesting case, Davion Taylor, obviously, because he wasn't allowed to play high school football because of his religious beliefs. And then in college, he only played like 2 years at the D1 level. So I mean, that's going to be an interesting situation to see if any of those 3 guys, Stevens, Taylor, or Bradley, can emerge. But you look at like the 3 guys, I think like TJ Edwards is good in his, I think he's a quality player in his role as sort of a 2-down linebacker on those rundowns. But, you're not going to have him on the field much in those obvious passing situations. Eric Wilson is a guy that they hope will be a competent starter. And then, Alex Singleton racked up a ton of tackles and was certainly an upgrade over Nate Gary, but kind of want to see a little more of a library of work for him before, we sort of rubber stamp him as a quality, 3-down linebacker. But, not a lot of depth there, obviously, either a linebacker, corner, or safety. I think they're in big trouble. I mean, as is just on the starting lineup, but beyond that, even if a guy goes down, then they're substantially worse as well.
Real quick follow up there. How much have you looked at Eric Wilson? I see a guy who's a 20-point scorer on a bad NBA team. Like, he made some plays.
Yeah.
But the Vikings defense just fell apart
because
of injuries and free agent losses. He made plays, but it wasn't good.
Yeah, I can see that. He gives you, in theory, what we think the Eagles are going to be looking for in the linebacker position under Jonathan Gannon, disciple of Mike Zimmer, of course. They want guys, I think, who can, rush the passer a little bit, whereas that was not a priority under Jim Schwartz, who can, obviously play the run and be in coverage. And you want that from every linebacker, obviously. But, he gives you a little element of each of those things. I don't think he's spectacular at any one of them. And I think you're right. I think you racked up a lot of stats because they had a lot of injuries on that defense, and he was just put in a position where he could rack up a lot of stats. But I'm not sold on him as a quality starter either.
Let me further John's basketball analogy here for another Eagle linebacker, the 20-point a game on the bad NBA.
Yes.
Let me describe Genard Avery as a 20-point in an NBA preseason game, who, when he actually got to play in a regular season game, instead scored 4 points. So what do? He's a small forward. Let's try him out at guard. Let's change his position and think that's going to get him back to the 20 points that he got in the preseason game. This guy never flashed on tape for me, at least since he was in an Eagle uniform. And again, we're back into the question of who's going to really make the decision on how this guy is used, if he's used. Is it going to be the new coaching staff, or is it going to be the general manager who traded for him, didn't pick him up off the scrap heap, actually gave up a draft pick to get him, and the guy's done pretty much nothing since he became a Philadelphia Eagle? What does the future hold, specifically this year, 2021, for Mr. Avery?
That is as baffling a trade as Howie Roseman's made in his tenure. And it's not that big a deal because they gave up a 4th-round pick, which it's not, it's a decent pick. Like, it's not a premium pick, but it's a pick you want to have, clearly. And the timing of the trade is what really gets me. They traded for him at the 2019 deadline, which is when it's probably the biggest seller's market as you're going to get in terms of trade compensation. Like, that's when you see trades that are highly favoring the team that's trading the player away for a draft pick at the trade deadline. And the reasoning for the trade that Howie Roseman gave at the end of that season wasn't the same as when they made the trade for Golden Tate in 2018, and that they needed someone immediately to step into the lineup and produce. They traded him because he had 2 years left on his contract, after the end of that season. He was only in the 2nd year of his contract, so they had 2 full years thereafter, and he was going to be a guy that they develop off during the off season and get him up to speed, and then he can play a role in the defense going forward. Okay, well, why not trade for him during the offseason? But then also the compensation of a 4th-round pick didn't make any sense because I think the Browns drafted him in the 5th round, I believe, and he hadn't done much for them. He was basically inactive most weeks during that season, and you're going to give him a better pick than what they took him at? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And you're right, Jody. Like, he really hasn't done anything in this in this defense so far. The one thing I will note about him is I do wonder if the Eagles are going to, play sort of like a hybrid, show sort of like a hybrid defensive scheme, like a 4-3 under that sort of has some, 3-4 principles in it. And we got some hints of that in that, they signed Ryan Kerrigan, who could potentially play that kind of Anthony Barr-like role. They drafted a guy in Patrick Johnson. You don't want to make too much of a guy they took in the 7th round, but he's a guy that would sort of fit that role. Genard Avery is a guy that sort of maybe can fit that role. So when they moved him from defensive end to linebacker. So, maybe there are some clues in Avery and Johnson and Kerrigan that they are going to play sort of that 4-3 under defense.
Yeah, that to me is a positive, and I think that might be Kerrigan's role. And then you do have the Averys and the Patrick Johnsons, even the Osmans as sort of that stand-up rusher. So I think you might be right about that. Now we got to real quick last thing while we have you, Jimmy. We got to talk about the cornerback position. I mean, what is this team doing? Josiah Scott. I mean, he looks like physically he's a clone of Avonte Maddox. Same size, same speed, same everything. They could be the same player. Avonte played outside at Pitt, though, so he's a little bit more comfortable, I think, playing outside the numbers, although you probably didn't see that last year.
Yeah.
Zach McPherson, I think, is a slot corner. I mean, I think they'll be fine in the slot, but who the heck is going to play opposite Darius Slay?
Yeah, I don't think they solved that position yet. I think they're probably still going to sign someone to play. They'll just slap a Band-Aid on that CB2 spot. But it's funny you mentioned Avonte Maddox on the comp for Josiah Scott because when you look up, you Google like Josiah Scott, scouting report, you find like Lance Zierlein of NFL Network. He writes a scouting report for almost every prospect leading up to every draft, and his player comp in, I guess, what was he drafted? 2020, Josiah Scott?
2020, yeah.
His player comp was Avonte Maddox. Right. So you're absolutely right. Like, he does sort of fit that same, play style and size and athleticism and all as Avonte Maddox. And I get it. Like, I get it adding a guy like that because you let Nickel Roby-Coleman might be out of the league now. He had a disaster season, but Cravon LeBlanc, they haven't brought him back, so they do need more depth at that slot corner spot. But how much depth do you need there when you don't have that outside corner spot fixed yet? So, yeah, I don't know why you'd give up a pick for a guy like that. It feels like, backup slot cornerback is kind of something that you don't have to give up a pick to get, but that's what they did. And, I mean, that cornerback spot, you have Darius Slay obviously will start at one spot. Avonte Maddox was clearly not capable of playing on the outside with his size last year. Zach McPherson asking him to, play immediately as a rookie is, I mean, if he can do it, great, but you can't count on that from a 4th-round pick. So we'll see what he can do, whether he plays outside, inside, a combination of the two, who knows? But yeah, I mean, it's as troublesome a spot on their roster as you'll find, and on a roster that's, not good from top to bottom to begin with.
And Jimmy, last thing, we've had you for half an hour now, and we talked about the defense and the offense, and not once have we mentioned the quarterback, which doesn't much happen anytime you talk about any NFL team, and certainly not the Philadelphia Eagles are going with a relatively new quarterback. Yeah, he started 4 games at the end of last year, but Jalen Hurts is going to get his chance to prove he's a full-time franchise quarterback in the NFL. And John used the term clean slate earlier in the show. He gets a clean slate. New coaching staff gets a clean slate. Maybe the likes of Quez Watkins and Hightower and a bunch of the wide receivers who didn't quite get that 600 yards last year all get a clean slate. Are they going to be able to make the most of it? Is the leadership role that we believe that Hurts can have with this team going to work with this new clean slate?
Yeah, well, I mean, the big thing that Nick Sirianni just hammered into us all throughout his initial press conferences was that he was adaptable in Indianapolis, where they had, Andrew Luck starting one year. The next year they had Jacoby Brissett. The next year they had Phillip Rivers. So 3 different skill sets from 3 different kinds of quarterbacks, and they adapted the offense to fit, their strengths. And the challenge for him is going to be able to fit the strengths of Jalen Hurts. And the strengths of Jalen Hurts are his intangibles. I think he's got a great head on his shoulders. I think he's competitive. I think he's going to, give them everything that they want from the off-field, perspective. But on the field, he's outstanding as a runner. Like, in my opinion, you have Lamar Jackson, and then after Lamar Jackson, he is the most skilled running quarterback in the NFL. Can he throw the football? He couldn't throw it that well in his small sample size in 2020. You look at his 52% completion percentage, which, on paper, you can sort of make the leap and say, okay, he wasn't accurate. And, you can make excuses for that. He threw a lot of balls away. His receivers weren't good, blah, 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 blah. Actually look at the passes that he threw. Yeah, he missed a lot of makeable passes in the 4 games that he played. So I think the accuracy issues are very much legit. His arm strength, I don't think it's a positive. I don't think it's a negative. I think it's fine. But the accuracy really is something that has to improve substantially from last year to this year if he's going to have any chance of holding down this starting job beyond 2021. And there's reason to believe he can. So in college, he was inaccurate, very early in his career, and it got better each year as he went along. So we'll see if he can continue that trend in the pros. But again, that'll be sort of the defining thing on his 2021 season and whether he can lock down that job, going forward.
Jimmy, great stuff. We kept you a long time. We appreciate you hanging with us, buddy. Maybe I'll see you at the Wawa later. I don't know. The Malton Mafia reigns here in town. Thanks for coming on with the Mac and Mac guys today. We'll talk to you again soon, big guy.
All right, man. Let's get a beer soon in Marlton.
Done deal. That is Jimmy Kempski from PhillyVoice.com. Chickies and Pete's. Can't be a mile from my house. We can go over there anytime you want, Kempski, as long as McMullen's buying. He is John McMullen. I am Jody McDonald. We are the Mac and Mac guys. We got another good guest coming about 25 minutes from now. We're going to punch up Matt Verderame. I've had Matt on my CBS sports radio show a bunch of times. I think he's one of the more insightful NFL columnists. He does it these days for fansided.com. Come back. I got a couple other things I want to run by my partner, including Julio Jones rumors. They're just busting out all over the place, and somehow the Eagles are getting into
of
the
course.
mix.
And the Eagles, Jody. And the Eagles.
Don't quite understand that, and we'll talk about that. Aaron Rodgers showing up on SportsCenter last night. Good thing, bad thing. I got a couple of opinions on that. I'll get McMullen's as well. Keep it right here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you. Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 98, is a proud sponsor of The Labor Show with J. Doc and Krause every Saturday night from 6 to 8 p.m. IBEW Local 98's highly trained and superbly skilled electricians are the best in the business, setting the highest safety standards in the electrical industry. So when you're planning your next industrial, commercial, or residential project, choose an IBEW Local 98 union contractor. Learn more at IBEW98.org.
The future waits for no one, so we refuse to wait for it. We're not just pilots and engineers. We are pioneers. Today, battles are waged in nanoseconds, and planes are piloted from the other side of the world. We turn night into day and fly missions in space. The future's not coming. It's already here. This is the future. Join us and be the future.
The savoring taste of a good bag of beef jerky is so enjoyable at any time of the day, as long as you can find it. Here's what we suggest. Pure Bull Beef Jerky is our answer, and soon it will be yours. Locally produced in the Philadelphia region, this high-quality, healthy protein snack is easy to secure. Go to steersnacks.com, and you'll see hot garlic, tropical heat, Pure Bull dry rub, and our favorite, Huck and Fod. What's that? Huck and Fod. Go now to steersnacks.com.
Welcome to the Wildwoods, the perfect place where you can safely do everything or nothing at all. Catch a wave, take a nap, go for a drive, grab a bite. It's your vacation, and we're doing everything we can to make it a safe one. The Wildwoods. Your vacation, your way.
Got an hour in the books. That means we got an hour left to play on this Tuesday edition of Birds 365 with your Mac and Mac guys. Thank Jimmy Kempski coming on board, sticking around as long as he did. Matt Verderame of Fansided scheduled to join us coming up about 20 minutes from now. And we'll certainly get Matt's perspective. One of the reasons I know John feels the same way I do here, that we like getting national guys on. We're not going to give you national guys on a day in, day out basis, but we do get national guys on, and we'll have Mike Garafolo, Philly guy, who's certainly a national reporter these days for the NFL Network, on tomorrow. They get to give you the perspective from a step back. John is on top of it every single day. I'm here in town judging the Eagles from right up close and personal. It's nice to get a different perspective from someone who isn't covering the Eagles on a day in, day out basis. That's what a guy like Matt Verderame should be able to give us coming up about 20 minutes from now. Mike Garafolo will tomorrow. But we do give you the national perspective on the National Football League as well. And a big story the last several days, and it got even bigger yesterday, was Julio Jones and his potential to leave the city of Atlanta. I will be honest, after Birds 365 was over yesterday, I was relaxing on the couch doing some work, and I flipped on Undisputed, the show that's on Fox with Skip, never met a guy he couldn't hate, Bayless, and the ex-superstar tight end / Hall of Famer, Shannon Sharp. And they were discussing Julio Jones. And Skip Bayless, a well-known Cowboy fan and devotee, was talking up a blue streak about Julio Jones joining the Cowboys because there was a picture on social media of Julio Jones in a Cowboy sweatshirt. Yeah. And 2 + 2 = 4, so he's got to be a Dallas Cowboy, even though the Cowboys already have a $20 million wide receiver on their roster and 2 other very good young wide receivers. Yeah, let's add another wide receiver, even though it makes no sense whatsoever. Give Skip Bayless a chance to open his fat mouth, and he's going to do so. And that's exactly what he did. And Shannon Sharp attempted to shut him up, and he did so in a pretty damn cool way. On the show, on the air at the time, he breaks out his cell phone, goes to his contacts, connects the call. He's got Julio Jones in his cell phone. And yo, Julio. And Shannon starts asking him about what's going to happen with him upcoming in his career. What was the deal with the Cowboy jersey? Are you staying in Atlanta? I'm out of there. He said this live on the air. And I think he knew he was on the air, but I don't know for sure because he didn't inform him. Hey, Julio, we're on the air at this time. But he just answered the question honestly. So Julio Jones believes he's going to be traded by the Falcons. Probably not to the Cowboys, but I think it's about as likely that he ends up with the Cowboys as he does the Eagles. But if there's a big name out there to be talked about, Howie Roseman is somehow going to wiggle his way into the conversation. Jason LaConfora, an NFL insider for CBS, said, and you can never count out the Eagles when it comes to being involved in a big trade. I give Howie Roseman credit because he's built up this reputation that has him being mentioned every single time there is a big name on the open market. Give me the percentage chance that Julio Jones is going to end up here in Philadelphia, John McMullen.
5%. And by the way, Jody, the reason he's always brought up, and I always joke, every rumor in the NFL ends the same way, and it's ... and the Eagles. That's what happened. And the reason why that happens is because Howie does make the call. He makes the call. So he'll check in, and then you can report it and say, Howard Roseman, is interested. The Eagles are interested in Julio Jones. Blah, blah, blah. Why wouldn't you be? There should be 31 other teams interested in Julio Jones. Even the Dallas Cowboys, even with all their receivers. If everything fit perfectly, which rarely happens. Look at Ryan Kerrigan, much lower, but we opened the show talking about Ryan Kerrigan. Much lower profile, even though he's a very good player. It fell into place. The Eagles weren't going to be in the mix at $7-8 million a year. 1.36 million a year. The market's not there. Oh, we're interested. And boom, Ryan Kerrigan and the Eagles. Ryan Kerrigan's an Eagle. Julio Jones, I mean, they could use an X receiver, Jody. We've been talking about it forever. This is the X receiver in the NFL. This guy's first ballot, Hall of Famer, unbelievable player. Can you imagine the pieces? We were talking with the pieces with Jimmy Kempski, Devontae Smith at the Z, Jalen Reagor in the slot, Julio Jones at the X. That's a playoff team if the quarterback can complete 60% of his passes.
Right, but Jalen Reagor would have to beat out Greg Ward for the slot. That's just my personal opinion, but that's I'm sorry to interrupt.
I think he'd have a good chance. That's my opinion. But nonetheless, perfect fit from a football standpoint. Oh, by the way, they have no money. He makes a ton of money. They have less than $4 million on the salary cap as we stand here. What are you going to trade? You're going to trade Fletcher Cox for him? Does Atlanta want Fletcher Cox? Do you want to make your defense that much worse? So the only reason I say 5%, it's probably closer to 1.5%, because Julio, oh, by the way, Julio said, I want to win. The Eagles, in theory, are not. You talked about the national guys. One reason I like the fact that we're having Matt on. One reason I'd like to get national guys on is because you want to get that perspective, whether it's right or wrong, whether you like it or don't like it, the national perspective of this team, which, by the way, is the perspective Julio Jones has, it isn't very good.
No.
So for a guy who wants to win, he's not coming to Philadelphia right now. So I put it at 5%. It's probably more realistic. It's probably 2%, 1%. He's not coming here. No, but he's a great player.
Let me add to your reasons why. I'll disagree on one of the things you said, but let me add to your reasons as to why Julio Jones is not coming here. Yes, Julio Jones, if and when he gets traded, will almost definitely be redoing his contract with his new team. Oh, by the way, Julio wants to upgrade his contract, not downgrade his contract, not make less money. He wants more money, which would mean more guarantees. And one of the things that the Eagles had to do this year, just to be able to put forth a quasi-competitive team, as John just noted, most national experts have the Eagles in the bottom 5, 6, at best 7 teams in the National Football League. To do that after taking the $33 million dead cap hit on Carson Wentz, they had to restructure contracts of guys who are already on the roster. And you don't want to do too much of that, because then you're just pushing your cap question marks down the road into another year. We know next year they'll get major relief because Carson Wentz and his dead cap money will be off the books. So it should clear up a lot of the issues. But if you're going to do that with a guy like Julio Jones, bring him in and say, all right, yeah, we'll guarantee you, and then we'll add phony years to the back end. You're only continuing to add to your cap hell going further. And I don't know that the Eagles want to do that in this year, where Julio Jones could come in and take them from a 7-win team to a 9-win team, and 9 might not be enough to make the playoffs anyway. So what are you really doing? What are you achieving? It's all debatable. So that's one of the big reasons why I don't think Julio Jones is going to come here. Salary cap more than anything else. As you noted, Julio makes a judgment call if he's going to say, No, I don't even want to redo the contract with a team like the Eagles because I don't think the Eagles are going to be good enough. I want to be traded to a team that's going to the playoffs and can win when they get there. So that's going to throw more of a douse on the flame of Julio Jones coming here and the like. And number 3, and some people may think this is an overstatement on my part, maybe a little too birds optimistic. I think they want to give some of these young guys a chance. I think they want to give Hightower a chance. I think and it's, again, my opinion, last stand for J.J. Arcega-Whiteside to prove that he wasn't a wasted second-round pick. New coaching staff, head coach who is a wide receiver type expert. I think they want to give him another shot at potentially grabbing a spot. I think they want to find out that 5-game run that Fulgham had last year, was it an optical illusion or is he that good a player? You bring in Julio Jones, add him to Devonta Smith, who you took as high as you did in the first round. He slammed the door shut. Everybody else is playing for one position. I want Julio Jones on the field like 100% of the offensive snaps. I want Devonta Smith on the field 100% of the offensive snaps. That leaves crumbs for everybody else. I think that it's always nice that Howie Roseman...
Well, Jody, real quick, you know what I think? Julio's an FU player. I don't give a crap about everybody else. I mean, if you're able to get him, you get him. First ballot Hall of Famer, best X receiver in football, still playing at that high level. He's different. I don't care about any other name you mentioned, with the exception of Devonta Smith, who's going to play anyway. So, but I mean, you don't have to worry about it. Vegas, I just pulled up the lines. Baltimore, it goes Baltimore, San Francisco, New England, the Chargers, Titans, Colts, Packers, then the Eagles, who are 10-1, and the Eagles. Everybody puts and the Eagles.
Let me ask you a question about something you just said. What do you consider Devonta Adams?
He's an FU player.
Well, no, position-wise.
Oh, position-wise, he can play X or Z. He can play. He can play. I don't want him. He can play the slot as well. When you get up, but I don't want him in the slot. When you get up those types of receivers, top 10 level receivers, you generally move them all around. You generally take advantage of whatever matchup you can have. Julio plays Z as well at times. The Falcons have Calvin Ridley. He's a great slot receiver, great Z receiver. The good receivers, Nick Sirianni's right. You move them all around. The problem is if the other guys move around and they're not good at the other positions, then you have a problem. And then you have to kind of default to where, in other words, you have to take into account where they play poorly because you can't put them there. And that means you have to put the good receiver in the position that they can't play, if that makes sense.
I understand where you're coming from. Do you consider DeAndre Hopkins one of those receivers? He's an X, he's a Y, he's a Z, whatever the hell you want him to be. He's that good.
Mainly an X, but yeah, he's that good.
Gotcha. All right. That's why you said Julio Jones, best X receiver in the National Football League. I disagree. I think Devonta Adams and DeAndre Hopkins have both surpassed Julio Jones.
You could argue DeAndre. I don't think Devonta. Devonta's a great route runner. Maybe it's not fair, but I do think Aaron Rodgers tends to elevate people. Julio Jones is just a monster. I mean, a monster. Nobody can stop him. This is one of the great receivers of all time. He is the most physically impressive receiver since Calvin Johnson.
Wow, that's saying a lot. I'm a Julio fan too, but apparently not as big as you because and again, physically impressive is very important. If you've got it as something in your tool bag, you certainly want to take advantage of it and use it. I'll judge just how he make plays. I don't care how big.
Well, I mean, who's made more plays, Jody? I'm going to look up Julio. I'm guessing.
Last 2 years, I would suggest DeAndre Hopkins' numbers were better than Julio Jones.
5-time All-Pro Julio Jones. 5-time. 2-time receiving yards leader. Yeah, I mean, when you get up into the 5-time All-Pro conversation, the one thing I will say, and it's fair, considering how big and physical he is, he hasn't done a lot historically in the red zone, which is weird to me. So I don't know if that's a Falcons problem. I don't know what that is, but I will admit that part of it's weird because he should be the most dominant red zone receiver in football, and he hasn't been.
Right. And as physically gifted as he is, as you described him, and I think it's a very accurate description. I'm not going to argue that with you. It's funny because everyone's got their own perspective. My perspective of Julio Jones, more than anything else, was fourth down in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, Philadelphia.
2017, got his hands on the ball. If he makes that catch, we're not talking about the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. They get derailed before that Super Bowl ever starts to run. And I think now that this is going on 4 years now that we're removed from that, that becomes more and more forgotten with every passing year. That Julio Jones actually had his hands on the ball in the end zone under a minute to go. He catches it. The Falcons take the lead. And we're not talking about Nick Foles running up the score against Minnesota the week thereafter and then out-dueling Tom Brady in the Super Bowl 2 weeks after that. They lose to the Atlanta Falcons.
Well, here's my takeaway from Julio Jones. For a team that we talked about with Jimmy Kempski, hasn't had a 600-yard receiver in 2 years. So you go, okay, Jody, you go 2014 to 2019. 1,593 receiving yards, 1,871 receiving yards, 1,409, 1,444, 1,677, 1,394. That is an FU player.
Yeah, he's a little bit better than what the Eagles have had at wide receiver. I don't think anyone in his right mind would attempt to argue that. But yeah, you got to keep an eye on those touchdowns because he hasn't been as prolific a touchdown guy.
Yeah, that's weird. I can't explain that. I'll be honest.
I'm a D-Hop guy. I think DeAndre Hopkins is the most talented wide receiver in the league. And I think Devonta Adams, and you're right, the whole thing you got to decide about Adams, which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Is he as good as his numbers say he is because of Aaron Rodgers, or does he help elevate Aaron Rodgers and make Aaron Rodgers?
I don't think it is a chicken and the egg. I love Devonta Adams. I think he's a great player, but I don't think anybody elevates Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers elevates everybody else.
More likely, but we'll see if Rodgers decides to relocate this offseason. And oh, by the way, did you catch him on SportsCenter last night?
I did. Well, I saw the clips, not live.
Yeah, neither did I. I saw the clips thereafter. He comes on, white T-shirt. I don't even know if it was white. Actually, may have needed to be washed. It certainly needed to be pressed because the neck was plunging badly. The hair just stole.
Yeah, I think he's in Hawaii. He's in
Hawaii for a friend's wedding. Talk about just kicking back, chilling, and relaxing. But he allows them to bring a camera into, I guess, his hotel room just to be able to hop on and chat with Kenny Mayne, who was doing his last ever SportsCenter.
By the way, good job, ESPN, with Kenny Mayne. You know, Kenny Mayne's so talented, he gets Aaron Rodgers to drop any pretense. And by the way, the ending was awesome. Did you see the ending?
What are you referring to?
Kenny Mayne ended the interview. He said, basically making a joke. Anybody who knows Kenny Mayne does. He said, Aaron, you recommended cryptocurrency. I listened to you. I'm down 40%. I lost my job. All my daughter wants is a comforter. F you. And he walked off.
Great for Kenny Mayne. A quick Kenny Mayne story. And then we got to bring Matt Verderame, a fan sided on here. When I worked for ESPN years ago, ESPN Radio, they asked me, I wasn't working for ESPN at the time. They asked me to freelance cover the Kentucky Derby. I was part of the Kentucky Derby broadcast. I don't know if it was the year. I think it was the year Musburger was the host. in the booth was myself, Jerry Bailey, Hall of Fame jockey, one of the greatest of all time, who still does all the TV work on NBC now when they have the Triple Crown coverage. But Jerry was in the radio booth with us for ESPN that year, and yours truly as the wagering analyst, and did it for 2 years, had a great time doing it. Kenny was there for SportsCenter, and they had the ESPN crew, television and radio, in the same hotel. So we stayed not far from the track. And I didn't have a rent-a-car. They said we'd double it up on rent-a-cars, blah, blah, blah. So you could walk to the track from where our hotel was. And that's what I was planning on doing. I did it on Friday. I walked over. I walked back. On Saturday, day of the Kentucky Derby, I was walking out of the hotel, and I was ready to walk back over to, and somebody comes walking up behind me and just taps me on the shoulder. He goes, "What do you think you're walking? Get the hell over here. Get in my car." And I knew Kenny to say hi, but we weren't like buds or anything. But he pulls me into his car. He says, "I got to pass. I'm parking right in front. You're not walking. Get in the car with me." And we did. We drove. We talked about the race. We talked about this, that, and the other thing. And like I said, it was walking distance, so it should have been a 2-minute ride. But you have to go through security and everything else. So it took us a solid 15 to 20 minutes just to get to the parking spot Kenny was in. It was maybe the best 15 minutes of that weekend, other than a couple of races where I cashed big tickets. But just the most regular guy, down-to-earth guy, great sense of humor. I agree with you. Shame on ESPN. He will be missed. They kind of screwed that up. But my question was going to be, and again, we got to get Matt Verderame up here. Aaron Rodgers, more purposeful that he hopped on to try and get a spin out there? Or do you think he was just being a good guy, cool guy, likes Kenny Mayne, knows Kenny Mayne, wanted to do him a solid, hop on his last ever sports?
Well, I think he likes Kenny Mayne, loves him, wanted to do him a solid, but also he was trying to get something accomplished. I mean, Aaron's always got an angle. So I think it's part of both. But yeah, I mean, he said it's about people. I mean, come on. These guys are insane that they think people are buying this. I mean, he hates the GM, he hates the organization, and he's trying to spin it. Oh, I love Jordan Love. Come on, dude. Come on.
You weren't buying that, huh?
No.
He loves a kid. I think he called him a kid, as a matter of fact, which he can do. He's been around long enough that Aaron Rodgers can get away with that.
And by the way, he might like him, but he didn't like that they picked him.
He's still smarting about that one. He is John McMullen. I am Jody McDonald. We on the Mac and Mac, guys. This is Birds 365. That's certainly a topic we're going to bring up with Matt Verderame, a fan-sided national NFL columnist. He's scheduled to join us next here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
7 on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 98, is a proud sponsor of The Labor Show with J. Doc and Krause every Saturday night from 6 till 8 p.m. IBEW Local 98's highly trained and superbly skilled electricians are the best in the business, setting the highest safety standards in the electrical industry. So when you're planning your next industrial, commercial, or residential project, choose an IBEW Local 98 union contractor. Learn more at IBEW98.org.
The future waits for no one, so we refuse to wait for it. We're not just pilots and engineers. We are pioneers. Today, battles are waged in nanoseconds, and planes are piloted from the other side of the world. We turn night into day and fly missions into space. The future's not coming. It's already here. This is the future. Join us and be the future.
The savoring taste of a good bag of beef jerky is so enjoyable at any time of the day, as long as you can find it. Here's what we suggest. Pure Bull Beef Jerky is our answer, and soon it will be yours. Locally produced in the Philadelphia region, this high-quality, healthy protein snack is easy to secure. Go to steersnacks.com, and you'll see hot garlic, tropical heat, Pure Bull dry rub, and our favorite, Huck and Fod. What's that? Huck and Fod. Go now to steersnacks.com.
Welcome to the Wildwoods, the perfect place where you can safely do everything or nothing at all. Catch a wave, take a nap, go for a drive, grab a bite. It's your vacation, and we're doing everything we can to make it a safe one. The Wildwoods. Your vacation, your way.
Tuesday edition of Birds 365 with the Mac guys, John McMullen, Jody McDonald. Yes, a lot of bird conversation, but also taking a look at the National Football League. We'll combine both of those things with our next guest. He's become a fairly regular guest on my CBS Sports radio show. Does a great job whenever he hops on. I thought he'd give us a good perspective today on the birds from a national perspective, and also talk some things in the NFL. Matt Verderame from fansided.com. Good enough to hop aboard with us for a couple of minutes. How are you, Matty?
Doing good. How are you guys?
Good. Appreciate you coming on board. Right before you joined us, John and I were talking about Aaron Rodgers and his appearance last night on SportsCenter. I know the answer is a combination. That's what John just told me, and he's 99% right. But lean one way more or the other. Aaron Rodgers just being a good dude and a good friend and throwing a solid to Kenny Mayne, hopping on his last SportsCenter, or Aaron Rodgers had a reason to go on SportsCenter that he wanted to get a narrative out there about his situation with the Packers. Which of the two was more the motivation for him being on SportsCenter last night?
Oh, I think both, but certainly the latter, right? Like, I mean, yes, sure, likes Kenny Mayne, last show, all that, fine, fair enough. But the reality is he was more than happy to go on there and give a pretty good answer as to what's going on in Green Bay. If he didn't want to say anything there, he could have sidestepped that. And while he was pretty deft in the way he answered it, he also made it pretty clear, look, this is about the front office. This is about the Packers believing that they can pretty much plug and play somebody and it's going to work out as long as they go with the Packer way. And, of course, he doesn't believe that. And I don't blame him for not believing that. And I also don't blame the Packers to look at this thing and say, look, we've been really good for 30 years. It's not just you. Now, the reality is it's largely driven by him and by Brett Favre over that time. If they had a lesser quarterback there, it wouldn't matter who was around them. But Rodgers has had some great teammates over the years. That team that won the Super Bowl was a great team. And I just think Rodgers, look, I get the frustration, but I also think he should give credit to that organization, especially Mark Murphy, who's been there his entire career, for putting quite a bit around him over his 15-plus years in Green Bay.
It's about the people, man. That's what Aaron said. But obviously the culture, and look, he doesn't like the general manager. As you mentioned, Mark Murphy. The Packers have always been, the GM picks the players, the coach coaches the players play. I mean, that's the Packers are the most clearly defined personnel team in this league. And I agree with you in the fact that, look, Aaron wanted a receiver last year. He elevates receivers. They have put a great offensive line in front of them over the years. David Bakhtiari may have been a mid-round pick, but they've developed him. When you look at Aaron saying maybe you haven't done the best things, do you think that's fair to say for the Packers as a whole?
I really don't. And I've heard the conversation about, well, they haven't used a first-round pick on an offensive player other than Jordan Love in the last decade. And I get that. But they haven't had to. Like, a lot of the years he's been there, as you mentioned, they've used mid- and late-round picks very, very wisely. I mean, Devontae Adams may not have been a first-round pick, but he's a hell of a pick. He plays like a first-round pick.
Yeah.
Right? Like, all those years with Donald Driver and Jordy Nelson and Greg Jennings and Jermichael Finley, right, and the host of running backs they've had, I don't care if they're not first-round picks. Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill aren't first-round picks. I don't think Mahomes was too worried about where they got drafted. Right? It works. So I don't get into all that. George Kittle wasn't a first-round pick, but it worked out okay. I think in the end, are they or are they not good players? Is he surround? I think the bigger gripe he might have, and I would agree with him, is that the coaching has not been great up until LaFleur got there. I mean, Look, McCarthy in the beginning, it worked very well. They win the Super Bowl. They're 15-1 the following year. That thing got stale, and it was stale for a long time. Okay, and then McCarthy goes to Dallas, and you see that, okay, maybe it was stale for a reason. I get that argument. I don't get the argument that he hasn't had talent. They've been to the NFC Championship game a ton. They haven't won it, but you get to the NFC Championship game that often, you're pretty talented. Like, it's not just Aaron Rodgers there, and it just hasn't gone the way in those games that he wishes it would. Fair enough, but he's also had a hand in a couple of those.
And the most recent example of doesn't matter where you're drafted. Who the hell was Robert Tonyan? All of a sudden, he's playing on a Pro Bowl level at tight end for the Packers last year. Where the hell did he come from? Doesn't matter that he wasn't a first-round pick. I agree wholeheartedly with you on that one, Matt. All right, so is there any mending of the fences? Is too much bad blood gone under this bridge? Can they resurrect the relationship between these two parties? Or is it a foregone conclusion that Aaron Rodgers will not play for the Packers again? Will he play for somebody else, or will he just be the full-time host of Jeopardy?
I think in his head, he's gone, but it doesn't really matter what is in his head because they have to trade him. And I've made this point, maybe even on your show, Jody. I'm not sure, but look, they don't have an owner. They're a very unique franchise. And a lot of franchises have that owner who's maybe in the GM's year, team president's year, saying, hey, look, we got to move on. It's a bad situation. Mark Murphy is a football guy. He played in the NFL for a long time. He's a football guy.
Yep.
Brian Gutekunst is a football guy. They don't care about the PR side of it like a lot of teams would with their ownership groups. And, by the way, they're in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which for anyone who hasn't been there, okay, is a very, very small town with nothing else going on. Those fans are going to side with the team every single time. Okay, Brett Favre came back to Lambeau and got booed. Like they're gonna side. So the Packers have no real motivation to trade him. Even if you get back a big haul of draft picks, so what? You'll get that big haul of draft picks in February. Like it's not. There's no huge reason. If you're Rodgers, you want to try to use your leverage and hold out. You can. You're going to get fined. You're going to lose money. If you want to really go nuclear and retire, you have to give back $23 million worth of a signing bonus. And then, by the way, you lose the $100 million left on your contract. To me, there is no way that's happening. So I look at this thing and say, I think he's really serious about being very angry there, but I don't think they're going to trade him. I really don't. I think they're going to dig their heels in and say, look, if you're going to play in 2021, you're going to play here. And he may pout and stomp his feet, but I think he's going to play there.
Matt, in a larger perspective, you look around the league. It's not just Aaron Rodgers. It was Russell Wilson, Seattle, Deshaun Watson, Houston.
Right.
Quarterbacks getting involved in personnel decisions or wanting to be involved or wanting to be in the process. Is that a good thing? Where did it start? I criticize coaches that want to be involved in personnel. There's not enough time in the day. I mean, at some point you have to delegate. You have to trust the people around you. Good organizations have that set up. The Packers have been a good organization for a lot of years. Seattle has, not Houston. So every situation is different. But where does this come from? Is this just a modern sort of athlete thinking that they should be involved in all pieces of the pie, so to speak?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes. I mean, look, the player empowerment side of things has really started in the NBA and it's taken root in the NBA. And I think you're starting to see a little bit of this in the NFL. But the reality is the NFL is a whole different animal. The NFL, a lot of these guys have non-guaranteed contracts once you get into the back half of the deals. The quarterbacks are the one position where those guys are going to have some power and influence in the front office because of how important they are, right? Like I remember it was a year ago. Chiefs flat out said they didn't like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. A big part of the reason they took him was Mahomes wanted him. But that was a big reason that they took Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now maybe they would have taken him regardless, but with Mahomes signing off, they did it. I think you're going to see more and more of that. However, I do think every situation is different. Like Deshaun Watson now, before all the legal stuff that has become ugly and very importantly public and front and center. Look, I get why he wanted out of there. that franchise is a dumpster fire. I totally understand why Deshaun Watson was like, look, I'm not going to get beat to hell behind this offensive line and win 3 games a year. I have no interest in doing that. If you're going to go down that route, trade me. However, with a guy like Russell Wilson, like, what is the complaint? I mean, yeah, I get it. Like, the offensive line hasn't been very good. If you want to say, hey, get me help on the offensive line, I'll hear that. I'll hear that argument. That's fine. You've been really good every year of your career. Like, you've been in the playoffs every single year, and it's not just him in that situation. They've had a very good defense most of his career. They've run the ball effectively most of his career. And then with Rodgers, obviously, we just talked about it. I do think quarterbacks, because of the salary they're paid and their importance in every single play of the game, they're going to have a say. But do you want your quarterback making personnel decisions? No, you don't. That's why you have an entire personnel department. I think most teams are going to kindly tell their quarterback that.
Matty, it's not just quarterbacks. It's wide receivers, too. And that's been a big story in the league for the last 48, 72 hours. Julio Jones and where he's going to be dealt, if he's going to be dealt. First things first, to help end a slight disagreement John and I have. I'll give you 3 wide receivers. I'll put them in order alphabetically. Then you tell me the order that you would rank them going into the 2021 season. Devonta Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones. What order would you put them projecting to the upcoming season 2021?
Devonta Adams, probably Hopkins and Jones. And Jones only 3rd because he was hurt last year and he's older.
Agreed. That's the exact. Well, I would put Hopkins 1. And I think Johnny Mac would put Julio Jones 1. You put Devontae 1.
No, yeah. Whoa. You didn't say in 20. Julio's coming off an injury, as Matt said. I said Julio has been the best X receiver in football. Now, the red zone issues concern me over the years. But his performance, 5-time All-Pro, I gave you, the numbers historic. This is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think those guys have reached this level as a whole. Now, at 32, coming off the injury, if you're saying who's going to be best next Sunday, I might have a different answer. If he's healthy, though, he can still perform at that level. That's where I am with Julio.
Gotcha. The difference is was and is. I think you said he is the best wide receiver, which is different than he was the best wide receiver.
He could be.
Fair enough. We're splitting hairs.
Splitting hairs.
Matty, how is this going to shake out? Julio goes on a national television show yesterday, says, I'm out of here, to Shannon Sharp on the air about Atlanta. He might not be going to the Dallas Cowboys. We here in Philadelphia would love to see him be added to the Eagles. Just doesn't add up. Doesn't make sense. How's this going to play out in Atlanta?
I mean, I do think he'll be traded. And I'd love to know, did he know he was live on air when he said all that?
Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Yeah.
But no, listen, I think he's going to get traded. That seems to be the worst kept secret in football the last couple of months. That has been a marriage that's about to end. If you're the Falcons, it's kind of an odd time to end it. Like, you just drafted Kyle Pitts. Your whole hope of getting back to the playoffs is your offense, because that defense isn't driving the bus. So, that's a little bit odd, but they've been in cap hell for years. And it's one thing to be in cap hell. It's another thing to be in cap hell and be terrible, right? Like, and I know you guys in Philadelphia have had some cap issues over the recent past, and that's fine when you're going to the playoffs and you're right in the mix every year. It's not so fine when you're winning 4 games.
Yeah.
And so Falcons now dealing with that. Look, I will say this. If I'm GM Terry Fontenot, who's a first-year GM, first real big trade he might be making here, I don't know that you can trade him for anything less than you've got to be thinking it's going to be a top 50 pick. Like, I've seen all this. Well, they're going to get a second-round pick. That seems to be the idea. Okay, I'll hear that. It better be an early second-round pick. Like, if you trade him to a contending team, if you trade him, just for an example, to the Bills, then that's got to be a first-round pick. Like, that can't be a second-round pick. It might as well be a third-round pick. So, I think that stuff all comes into play. Who's going to be interested? There's going to be a lot of teams that are kicking the tires on Julio Jones. Like, to stick with the analogy, if you're Buffalo and you think New England might try to get him, do you just say, hey, look, you know what? He's worth a second rounder. We can get him for a second rounder. For no other reason Yeah, it upgrades our team. It keeps them away from New England. I think you look around. You mentioned it. Like, does he fit with the Eagles? For a variety of reasons, maybe not. But I'll tell you what, they could use him in that receiver room. I mean, he'd be, and they got the picks. Although I don't think they're going to, like you said, I don't think it makes a lot of sense for them in the moment they're in. But there's going to be a ton of interest. I do think he'll get traded. And I'm sure if Atlanta can get into the AFC, they will. If I were the Chargers, I would be all over it. You've got Keenan Allen, you've got Mike Williams, you've got Justin Herbert. Like that, if you're going to beat Kansas City out, you better load up. And I would be very intrigued by Julio Jones in LA.
Matt, you mentioned the timing. That's what interested me with Atlanta. They know this has been going on. Why the dragging of the feet? Everybody's already budgeted. There's a lot of teams that have salary cap issues at this point, can't afford Julio Jones. So that, in theory, limits your potential pool of moving him. If you go all the way back to the draft, you make your decision and say, okay, we're going to go with Matt Ryan. We're going to go quarterbacks can play at a high level later in their careers.
Right.
So why not fix things? Because the strength of your team is Julio Jones, Kyle Pitts, Calvin Ridley. You're going to outscore people. The timing of this is what I struggle with.
So I think it's pretty much for one reason and one reason only, and that's because they have to trade him post June 1.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the financial side of if they were to go out and they were going to trade Julio Jones before June 1st, okay, I just pulled up in front of me, they'd be eating $23.2 million in dead money. They would not save a dime. Okay. Right. However, if they trade him post June 1st, they eat $7.7 million this year, but they save $15 million. So they drag their feet simply because they had to from a financial standpoint. Now you're right though; it limits what they can do and what they can get back. Like you're waiting a full year for those draft picks to mature, and a lot of teams don't have the money. Like the Giants, for example, maybe the Giants would have been in. Well, they signed Kenny Galladay. Like you're not also going to go out and get Julio Jones. So you're right. There are some teams, that stay in that same stadium. The Jets went out and got Corey Davis. Maybe it's a lot harder now to get Julio Jones. I would have thought the Patriots, after spending $500 million or $250 million, would not have been in, but now apparently maybe so. It is limited, and it is going to hurt what they can get back. But they put themselves into cap jail with all the money they've spent, and now that they have to do it post June 1. And when you're forced into that situation, that makes it tougher. To go back quickly, the Aaron Rodgers, I think that also complicates things. Like they could not trade him until after June 1st. Like maybe if they could have traded him in March, they would have done it. They couldn't. So, the finances play a part in this. I think that's why it took so long here at Jones.
Matty, this week in the National Football League here in Philadelphia and the other 31 towns, teams are doing voluntary workouts. And we can talk about the whole negotiation between the Players Association and the teams. I want to cut to the chase. How is it going to impact the upcoming season? Will we have better play? Will we have lesser play? It is what it is. They're not exactly tackling this week. It's more drills and exercises and stretching than anything else, but it's not vertical. They are actually showing up and they're getting big numbers in camp. Is it going to make for better play in the 2021 season or still just lesser play because they've had to negotiate this out and keep the actual accomplishments kind of under wraps?
See, I don't think it's going to matter at all. OTAs to me, all this voluntary OTA stuff, mini camps, it's all just, look, it was all put in play originally to make sure guys didn't show up 30 pounds overweight to camp. That's really what it's there for. And it's there for teams like the Eagles this year who have a first-year head coach, who have a young quarterback, who they can get every second they need to try to install things and get accustomed to each other before training camp. A lot of these things, if you're the Baltimore Ravens, like you don't need OTAs. You just don't. You could show up in August and it's fine, right? Like I firmly believe that. I think rookie mini camp is good. It helps these guys to get acclimated. That all said, I don't want to hear a word out of the players about the fact that the voluntary mini camps are a pain for them. Hey, look, you negotiated a CBA last year, Okay, you're not at the end of a CBA. You're at the beginning of a decade-long CBA. I was in Indianapolis asking a ton of people about the CBA a year ago, right as it was getting ratified. And you know what? They all signed off on it, or at least they had the majority sign off on it. Okay, and a lot of guys didn't even vote. So if you want to complain about it, you should take it up with DeMaurice Smith, and you should take it up with the heads of your players' union, because you all signed off on this. Like, by the way, if they didn't want this, the owners wouldn't have fought him on this. They wouldn't have cared. It's all, the owners might have wanted a little bit of some concession back in some other way, just because that's the way negotiating works. But they wouldn't have fought hard on voluntary OTAs. It was just fine. These guys are running around in helmets and shorts. So it's not a big deal. And the teams that aren't going to show up are the teams that don't have big workout bonuses. Okay, any team like Green Bay that has a big workout bonus attached to their contract, they're all going to show up.
Yep.
It's an easy $50,000.
Except Aaron, but
Except
it was 500. Yeah. But it's interesting. You mentioned Baltimore. I agree with you. Veteran teams, not important. It's ironic, John Harbaugh. Nobody's been fined more over the years for tweaking things at OTAs than John Harbaugh. But I do want to bring you back to Philadelphia, Matt. And, Peter King said yesterday, I thought it was interesting. The biggest surprise in the NFL isn't over the last year, wasn't Tom Brady at 43 leading the Bucs to a Super Bowl. It's that Doug Pederson, Carson Wentz are out in Philadelphia. Just, we're used to it now. From a national perspective, how crazy is that to rewind a year and say, these guys are out of here?
Surprising. Very surprising. I grew up not that far from Philly. I grew up in New York, so I'm used to the big city and how quickly things can turn around. But that being said, the Eagles had never won a Super Bowl. And they won largely. I get Wentz was hurt in the end there. But, largely they won that Super Bowl because of Wentz. And then Pederson really had some of the gutsier calls you'll ever see in a Super Bowl, and they worked out. It all came up aces. A handful of years later, everybody's gone. Now, look, as that year unfolded, Wentz was atrocious. They had no choice, I think, but to go to Jalen Hurts. And I thought it was unfair of Wentz to be, maybe through back channels, but so publicly upset about the fact he got benched. Well, he deserved to be benched. They gave him a lot of rope last year, a lot of rope. And he could do nothing with it. I was more surprised that Pederson's gone. But it seems like that organization from the top down has had a lot of issues for a long time now. And look, Jeffrey Lurie has been a good owner for that franchise, giving them a lot of stability over the years. They've won a lot with Jeffrey Lurie being there. Howie Roseman has done some very good things there. He's done some things there that have made a lot of people, question his decision-making. But it seemed like it just wasn't working out. And that story in The Athletic, I thought, was very well reported. They did a great job kind of detailing all the issues that are going on. I think the Eagles with Sirianni here going forward, they're going to have to streamline this approach. But it was very surprising. It felt like everything kind of came to a head in that Week 17 game where the Eagles, did they tank? Did they not tank? It seemed like that really was just the impetus for Pederson being gone. Was that the truth? I don't know. I don't know that anybody truly knows, but it seemed as though that game changed a lot of things, even though really for the Eagles, it changed nothing other than a little bit of draft position.
Matty, so give us the national perspective. John and I here every single day. We're inundated with information and opinion about Jalen Hurts, the new quarterback. No one believes that the Eagles are targeting him as their quarterback for the next 5 years. If it plays out that way, so be it. But as of this moment, that's not necessarily in the plans. But they're going to give him the shot. Is he going to be good enough to hold it? Is he going to be good enough to become a top half of the NFL quarterback? Can he become a top 10 NFL quarterback? Off what you saw last year, what you thought of him at both Alabama and Oklahoma, what kind of quarterback is Jalen Hurts going to be in his NFL career?
I usually trend negative on these things, but I actually think he's going to be pretty good. I really do. And the reason is multi-layered, but I'll say quickly, look, I think it mattered to me that at Alabama, he ends up getting benched for Tua, and he didn't just pout and sulk. He was a really good teammate by all counts. He went to Oklahoma and played really well. I also think it matters he played under Lincoln Riley, who a lot of people think will be an NFL head coach, and he played under Nick Saban, who is the basic godfather of college football coaching for the modern day coach. So he played at 2 huge programs. He didn't knuckle under when things didn't go well. That's going to matter in Philly because things are occasionally not going to go well. And when they don't go well in Philadelphia, you better be able to take it. So he's proven he can take it. Like Tuscaloosa, if there's a college program that gets as much attention as a national football team, it's them. He dealt with it in a very, very public way, getting benched in the national title game. I also thought talent-wise, look, I do believe that you need to have a quarterback these days with some mobility to him. It's just, unless you're Tom Brady, like it helps, it matters. It's just the way the game's going. Not that you have to run for 1,000 yards, but you have to be able to get out of the pocket, make some plays. He can do that. He's got a really good arm. I thought he was thrust into a tough situation last year. And let's face it, with a team that was decimated, not a lot of receiving weapons. Now he gets Devonta Smith. Okay, Zach Ertz is back healthy. Will he get traded? Maybe. But for right now, he's there. They have Dallas Goedert as well. And a good offensive line. So I look at them and say, look, do I think the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl? No. Do I think, though, that if Sirianni's a good head coach, that marriage could work? I do. I like what they're doing because they're giving Hurts the year. If it doesn't work out, you've got at least a couple of first-round picks. You can go out, you can get the quarterback of the future. If he does work out, then great, and you'll load it up with picks. So and by the way, the Giants did the exact same thing. So I think both those teams did very smart things this offseason. They're giving their guy a run, and if it doesn't work out, they're well positioned to make it work out going forward with either another quarterback or, again, if it does go well, then they can add in a lot of weapons and get the team better quickly.
He delivered as promised. Matt Verderame, one of my favorite national football writers. Matt, appreciate you coming out with us. We will tap into your services again down the road. Before you know it, they'll actually have mandatory camps opening up. We'll get you back when they actually put some pads on. Thanks for helping us out today.
Hey, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
Matt Verderame from fansided.com, outstanding national football writer. John McMullen, Jody McDonald coming back. We still got a couple minutes left to go. Need to put a bow on the show. Keep it right here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 98, is a proud sponsor of The Labor Show with J. and Krause every Saturday night from 6 till 8 p.m. IBEW Local 98's highly trained and superbly skilled electricians are the best in the business, setting the highest safety standards in the electrical industry. So when you're planning your next industrial, commercial, or residential project, choose an IBEW Local 98 union contractor. Learn more at IBEW98.org.
The future waits for no one, so we refuse to wait for it. We're not just pilots and engineers. We are pioneers. Today, battles are waged in nanoseconds, and planes are piloted from the other side of the world. We turn night into day and fly missions in space. The future's not coming. It's already here. This is the future. Join us and be the future.
The savoring taste of a good bag of beef jerky is so enjoyable at any time of the day, as long as you can find it. Here's what we suggest. Pure Bull Beef Jerky is our answer, and soon it will be yours. Locally produced in the Philadelphia region, this high-quality, healthy protein snack is easy to secure. Go to steersnacks.com, and you'll see hot garlic, tropical heat, Pure Bull dry rub, and our favorite, Huck and Fod. What's that? Huck and Fod. Go now to steersnacks.com.
Welcome to the Wildwoods, the perfect place where you can safely do everything or nothing at all. Catch a wave, take a nap, go for a drive, grab a bite. It's your vacation, And we're doing everything we can to make it a safe one. The Wildwoods. Your vacation, your way.
Coming back, ready to rack here on Birds 365. Jody McDonald, John McMullen here with you. Johnny Mac, before I ask you how your day is going to play out, I do want to touch on one thing that we brought up on yesterday's show that I checked out and was ready to give you more information because you asked me a question yesterday. I didn't have the answer off the top of my tongue but I tried to do a little research. Went on NFL.com gift shop yesterday, or pro shop, whatever you want to call it, via the internet, to check on jerseys, because you asked me yesterday, what does a real authentic jersey go for these days? And I said, could be upwards of 200. You thought 100 and change. As a matter of fact, at a 20% discount, they got a sale going on at NFL.com right now. 20% discount down to $119.99, which means if you add 20% back on the back end, it basically $150 for a new authentic jersey. But they're selling for $120 right now. The NFL puts them in a specific order. And I'm assuming that it is the hottest selling jersey over whatever period of time they use. Could be a day, could be a week, could be 2 weeks. Off the top of your head, see if you can pick off for me. Oh, by the way, did you go to NFL.com yesterday and look this up?
I did not.
That's good. That's good. Then I could ask this question this way. The number one selling jersey, as per the NFL.com, over the last couple of days would be who? What?
Tim Tebow.
Tim Tebow is number 85. Is number one. The second hottest selling jersey is who?
I'm going to go Brady.
Brady came in at number 6. Not bad, not a bad guess, but he was number 6.
And I'm gonna go Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence came in at number 7. Not a bad guess, but not correct.
Well, I'm going rookies. I'm going New Jerseys. I'm trying to think of free agents, shifting teams. New York, I got to go Zach Wilson. He's got to be top 10, right?
Zach Wilson was in the top 10, somewhere down at around 10, as a matter of fact.
Justin Fields, Chicago, big market.
Justin Fields of Chicago's white jersey was the number 2 selling jersey in the NFL, trailing only Tim Tebow.
Then I'm going to go, I don't think Lance would be there. I'm going to go Mahomes, I guess, superstar.
Mahomes nowhere to be found.
No, really? Wow.
No.
That surprises me. I don't know.
Top 5, think a little closer to home. Devonta Smith, number 5, right now, selling jersey in the National Football
I'm surprised we gave away so many. I'm surprised people have to buy them.
Yeah, despite the fact that we gave them away, people are still purchasing them. But I saw this and I just thought it was phenomenal because you know how big a fan I am. Tebow 1, Devonta was 5, Brady was 6. Oh, Brady Red 6, Brady White 7, Lawrence 8. Number 1, Tebow. Number 2, Fields in white. Number 3, Fields in Chicago black.
Yeah.
His white jersey is number 2. His black jersey is number 3. Number 4, Fields in orange.
Wow.
The orange jersey that the Bears wear from time to time. So Justin Fields has got the number 2 selling jersey, number 3 selling jersey, and number 4 selling jersey in the National Football League right now.
By the way, there could have been a green jersey for Justin Fields. Technically, there could have been. There could have been if the Eagles wanted that.
A green jersey was at number 5, and it says Smith on the back. So Eagle fans are buying into Devonta Smith. More power to them. Both John and I are fans. You know how big a fan I was. But we're also fans of Justin Fields, and we are wondering, 5 years from now, 6 years from now, are we going to look back and go, you know, Justin Fields was on the board at number 10 when they took Devonta Smith when the Eagles are floundering under whatever quarterback they.
I hope for the Eagles' sake that the Bears' history with quarterbacks continues to play out.
It is not a promising history, but I think Justin Fields can overcome that. And I think Bear fans have shown that they believe that's going to be the case. Now, it could just be cockeyed.
I bet you, I can't prove this, but I bet you Mitchell Trubisky was a top-selling jersey when he was picked at number 2.
We have to do some serious research to figure that out, but you are probably right about that because they are diehard fans of their Bears in Chicago, and they're willing to spend. It doesn't necessarily guarantee anything as far as production.
Imagine if we didn't give away all those jerseys. We probably... Devontae Smith would be 2. I'm not going to say 1.
It would certainly be higher, but I don't know if he'd pass Justin Fields' orange, black, or white jersey. Sell a lot of them in Chicago. All right, where you off to today, brother?
I'm headed straight to a gathering. I'm not going to call it practice. Straight to a gathering. By the way, no mask today because I'm fully vaccinated. Just got
very
that
nice.
News. Yeah, I was doing that during the show. I had to fill out the form and everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You don't you have to bring your card with you?
I'm multitasking.
I know you're capable of doing that. Don't you just have a card?
I do have a card. I have a card, but I had to sign and swear an affidavit that I've been vaccinated.
You didn't raise your hand at any point during the show. I think you should have done that then.
Yeah.
You'd have that on tape that
That's a good
you
point.
Swear that you have been double vaccinated.
I swear it on tape right now.
We try not to swear here on Birds 365, but sometimes we get a little ticked off and these things happen. You got to tune in tomorrow to see if we do any swearing or get ticked off enough to get nuts. Johnny Mac's not going to do that because he's all excited about getting down on the grass over at the Eagle Land Complex. We'll be back tomorrow. We have Mike Garafolo from the NFL Network scheduled to join us, and we'll probably fashion up another guest for you at some point. J-Mac, say hello to everybody down there at the Eagle Land. Appreciate the job today, brother. We'll do it again tomorrow.
Thanks, Shody. Appreciate it. We'll have stuff to talk about tomorrow. Ryan Kerrigan wearing number 90.
Very nice. We'll be right here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.